may not trouble himself with small matters such as car park. Mr. Chairman.
Holly Walker.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologise to my honourable colleague. Perhaps he'll get to fill in the other 15 minutes of his 20-minute call shortly. Mr. Chair, I'd like to address Clause 64 of Part 3, which is the clause that gives effect to one of the more significant changes in this bill, and that is the alignment of the definition of net income in the student loan scheme with that used in working for families. And that's one of the two probably more significant changes amongst a raft of very minor technical amendments in this bill. And Mr. Chairman, we feel in the Green Party that this alignment and this new definition of net income with that used by working for families is a sad missed opportunity to correct what is a very unfair element of the definition of income currently used under the student loan scheme and indeed for working for families. And this unfairness, I think, Mr. Chair, became apparent at the time when the government introduced the increased repayment rate under the student loan scheme from 10 to 12%, so that graduates now pay their student loans off at 12 cents in the dollar, even when they earn over the threshold, which is less than the full-time equivalent of the minimum wage. Mr. Chairman, at that time, what became apparent looking at the definition of net income used for both the student loan scheme and for working for families was that working for families entitlements are calculated based on the household's income before student loan repayments are deducted. And that is significant because, as I mentioned in my previous contribution, when we're talking about who is affected by the changes to the student loan scheme, we're talking about graduates, and graduates are grown-ups who have lives and jobs and homes and families, and many of them are eligible for payments under working for families, the definition of income of which this bill aligns. So many young families have student debt, and the changes therefore impact directly on families and on the mum and dad New Zealanders I talked about earlier. And what this means, Mr. Chairman, and what is now in practice under the current regime, is that the higher repayment rate for student loans of 12 cents in the dollar essentially operates as a tax. It operates as a higher tax or a tax increase on those families because they get no corresponding increase in their working for families entitlements, but their income is less each week because they have higher student loan repayments. So they're actually out of pocket every week by a significant amount. So if we're talking about aligning the definition of working for families income with the income under the student loan scheme, in our submission, Mr. Chair, that needs to be aligned after student loan repayments have been taken into account. It's all very well to align them as this bill does, but what this bill could have done and fails to do is correct that unfairness, Mr. Chairman, that student loan repayments are deducted before working for families. That working for families entitlements are calculated before student loan deductions have been removed. And so for many families, this actually has had a significant impact in their weekly budget. The second point I want to address on this point of aligning the definition of working for families income with the student loan scheme income is that they're not actually 100% aligned by this bill. And the reason for that is that by definition, the student loan scheme income is always calculated on the individual level because it's the individual borrower and their individual debt. But actually, working for families calculates income at the household level because it's looking at household and family entitlements. And what I would have liked to see, Mr. Chair, is the government explore that a little further before making the changes made in Clause 64 in Part 3 of this bill, to actually explore whether it would be possible or practical to align definition of income for student loan purposes with household income. And I believe, Mr. Chair, that would make it easier, or allow for an amendment that would make it easier for couples to help to pay off each other's loans. Now, if I can just explain a little bit what I mean by this, I believe that this would help to eliminate a significant gender inequality in the student loan scheme. What we know, Mr. Chair, is that women tend to take much longer to pay off their student loans, and over the lifetime they have higher student loan debt because of the the length of time they take off to raise children and the penalties and interest that they, in many cases, have accrued before student loans were interest-free, Mr Chair.
Holly Walker.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And so an amendment such as the one that I'm suggesting here, which again I think is a missed opportunity that this bill didn't take, is that if you made student loan income calculated at the household level, you could allow an amendment to take place which would make it easier for partners to assist each other to pay off their loans. For example, if a woman or even a man has taken some time out of the workforce to care for children, their partner could continue to pay 12% of their income, although it should be lower, but could continue to pay 12% of their income towards the student loan debt of their household, but they could split it between their own loan and their partner's loan so that the woman, or indeed the man, but in most cases it's the woman, doesn't accrue a higher student loan debt over her lifetime. I think that would help to eliminate what is one of the significant gender inequalities in the student loan scheme. And it could be achieved through what this clause here is trying to achieve in aligning the definition of income for student loan purposes with that used for working for families. The bill actually doesn't go all the way. It goes part of the way to aligning that definition of income, but because it does it only at the individual level and doesn't contemplate doing it at the household level, I think it's a significant missed opportunity to eliminate that gender equality. Now, it would be a complicated change to make, I acknowledge that, and we've had a number of complicated changes already to the student loan scheme. But I think it would have been great if the Select Committee or indeed the government had explored this opportunity in a little bit more detail, because for the purposes of the bill aligning the definition, it would actually achieve that to a greater extent. And it would make it easier for partners to help each other to pay off their student loan. And as a partner who's about to pay off mine and considering helping my partner to pay off his, I think that would be great. Mr Chairman, both of these changes, I think, highlight the effect that I talked about in an earlier contribution, which is that while the government and the members opposite like to talk about changes to the student loan scheme as if they are only affecting those greedy, selfish current students who never had it so good. In fact, the people affected by the changes in this bill and the other changes to the student loan scheme that have been made by this government over the last several years are graduates who are grown-ups, who are living their lives, who are homeowners, who have families, and who indeed may be voters potentially for this government. So I think they ignore that group of people at their peril and continue with these punitive changes at their peril, instead of looking at some smart amendments like I've just outlined, which could actually make lives easier and the weekly budget for those families who are struggling to make ends meet but working very hard, working to pay off their loans and to work towards owning their own homes. There are changes we could make to the definition of income in the student loan scheme that would make things easier for those families, and sadly the clauses in Part 3 here are a missed opportunity to do that.
Dr David Clark.
Mr Chair, in Part 3 of this bill, as my colleague